Hello everyone, my name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the podcast all about Joshi Pro Wrestling here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Every other Monday, we are with you talking about the biggest news in Joshi, along with show reviews, previews, and much, much more.
So if you're new to Joshi or you've been a longtime fan, this is the show for you. We've got something for everyone here. So check us out, Jumping Bomb Audio.
Hello there, my name's Neil David and I'm the host of Eurograps Express, the podcast exclusively dedicated to the wrestling of Europe. If it's wrestling and it happens in Europe and it's good, we talk about it. Whether it's Rev Pro, Progress, WXW, Passion Pro, Pro Wrestling Chaos, Pro Wrestling North, we don't care, we talk about them all. If it's good and it's exciting, I want to share it with you. We're on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Check us out on the feed, check us out on Twitter at EuroGrapsEXP, and join us for chat about European wrestling and a little bit of chat about cheese. Hopefully see you there.
These days, I do all my shopping online. Clothes, books, outfits for my dog. I love it. Then I thought, why not get my groceries delivered too? So I downloaded the Instacart app and sure enough, it has all my favorite stores. Macy's, Lynn's, Fresh Market, Dan's, Dick's. Everything I need delivered right to my door. Oh, the dog treats are here. Download the Instacart app or visit instacart.com to get free delivery on your first order. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply.
This week at Macy's, take an extra 20% off everything you need for holiday hosting with your coupon or Macy's card. That's on top of already great deals, like 60% off kids' dresses and dressy looks, 30 to 70% off gorgeous fine jewelry, and 40 to 50% off dining and entertaining essentials. Plus, Macy's Star Rewards members can earn rewards even faster during Star Money Bonus Days, going on now at Macy's. Savings off sale and clearance prices, exclusions apply.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hit my music.
You're listening to Music of the Mat on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Music of the Mat, the podcast devoted exclusively to the music of pro wrestling. It's all part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. I'm your host, Andrew Rich. This is episode 158, and it's a Music Memories episode. And today I'm joined by a returning guest here on the show. He's a contributor at Voices of Wrestling. It's Sean Sedor. Hello again, Sean.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing on this fine Monday evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I still have a ton of WrestleMania weekend shows that I need to work through. Raw and Lucha, the Impact show at some point, WrestleCon Super Show, stuff that I didn't get to when I was, taking part in reviews, I guess in between taking part in reviews for Ring of Honor and WrestleMania, and then, doing my own outside of wrestling things, watching a bunch of racing this weekend, which was there's a lot of wild and wacky stuff going on in that regard. But I'm here to do a wonderful edition of Music Memories with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we're doing a late night recording here because it's been a very busy number of days with WrestleMania weekend, as it is every year. I mean, it's always crazy this weekend, and now it's over, and thankfully we made it through, mostly unscathed, I think, because, I think as long as you don't, overindulge yourself with the 800 indie shows going on and WrestleMania itself and ROH and whatnot, you won't get too overloaded with things. But now if you're a maniac like Rich and Joe and Griffin Peltier are, and just reviewing all these shows over the weekend, that's a different story there. But that was not us, Sean, thankfully. So
right, yeah. Don't think I would be sitting, or I guess I don't think I would be willing to sit through all those Circle 6 shows. But like I said, I watched Ring of Honor, I watched WrestleMania, I watched NXT. Today I just finished the DDT show, and then like I mentioned earlier, I still want to watch Impact and World on Lucha and the WrestleCon Super Show. So not diving into the real muck of WrestleMania weekend, but still just got a couple of shows I want to hit here and there for next weekend and Easter. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched the Super Show. I watched the New Japan Impact show. I watched the ROH show, Takeover, WrestleMania, and I saw like bits and bobs of other shows like Bloodsport and DDT and whatnot, a few other things. So I had my fill of wrestling, that's for sure. And I'd say show of the weekend for me was definitely Supercard of Honor. That was just a fantastic show up and down the whole thing with, Vikingo Commander and Claudio and Eddie.
At least with what I've seen so far, I'd say that's probably the show of the weekend, and probably, depending, based on what's left for me to watch, it's probably going to be that way. I guess interesting that to me there have been a lot of great matches, or ones I've seen and ones that I've heard of that were great, but I haven't heard of anything that's like the match of the weekend per se. It seems like there's a couple different possibilities of what could be people's match of the weekend depending on what your preferences are. Like, there's no, for example, Nakamura versus Sami Zayn that everyone says is, this is the definite match of the weekend, or, Johnny Gargano versus Shingo, no, like, number one standout, but, still a lot of great wrestling, and I guess it's nice to have a different variety of what people think is the best match. So, there you go. I will say that, again, this is just my opinion, but I thought the Yoshihiko tag match from the DDT show was just as good as anything on the first night of WrestleMania, at least by my star ratings. So, that Yoshihiko is something else, let me tell you.
Hell of a worker, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that match was a blast, I agree. Him and Brooks versus Shun Mao in the DDT opener there, yeah, a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, Vikingo Commander, like I said, Claudio and Eddie, and the crazy tag team ladder match, and the Vikingo Commander Taurus 3-way, the Gunther Sheamus Drew 3-way at Mania. I mean, any one of those matches could be match of the weekend, and I wouldn't bat an eye at it. So yeah, the choice is yours. So there you go. Yeah, but anyway, we are here today, Sean, to do another Music Memories episode. And for those that may not know, Music Memories is when I have on a guest to talk about 3 memories from the wrestling fandom that are strongly linked to music in some way. It could be a wrestler's theme, it could be a TV or pay-per-view theme, it could be from a game, an album, a movie or show about wrestling perhaps, whatever it may be. And it's not about analyzing the songs, it's more about, a casual conversation about these memories, about these songs. And Sean, about a month or so ago, you messaged me that the next time I do one of these episodes, you wanted to be the guy for it, and well, here you are.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about this recently. I feel like I'm pretty sure I was not on Music of the Mat at any point last year. So I could be wrong, but I feel like it's been at least 2 years since I've done an episode with you. I know I did, I think it was the Batista episode. I'm pretty sure I did the Daniel Bryan episode, the Chris Jericho episode, and then I think I was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I was...
It was the WWECW TV themes episode.
Yes, yep, I remember that.
Which I believe was summer of 2021, around there. So,
right.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, and I know I did Jericho. I'm pretty sure I was on for Daniel Bryan Danielson, Batista as well. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have been one of the first guests on the podcast when it was still you and Chris doing it together.
I think you were the first. You were John Carroll.
Yeah, it was definitely on one of the New Japan albums. I remember that.
Yeah, I believe you were the first guest. I believe you were. Let me just check real quick.
Yeah, that was the very early days of that. Very early days of the podcast. Yeah.
Yep, episode 6. You're the first one. So.
Wow.
You have the honor.
Yeah, I can't believe that was that long ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, 6 years. Crazy, man. Crazy.
Now, episode 6 now, it's what, 158?
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, time flies, as the saying goes. Time just flies on by. But anyway, let's get to it then. Sean, what is your first music memory?
So, the first song that I chose, and for anyone who knows about my work in Voices Wrestling knows that I'm primarily, or one of the things I do primarily, is write about Ring of Honor, whether that's reviews or previews or the occasional column. So it should be no surprise that I picked a song from Ring of Honor. And given the timing of the last, 6 months or so, I felt it was appropriate to go with this one. It's Reach for the Sky by Adam Massacre, which was the theme song for the Briscoes.
Reach for the sky, boy!
So, I know during the Sinclair era, the Briscoes had a couple of different themes, particularly in the early part of the Sinclair era of Ring of Honor, but at least for me, in that period of their careers, this is the song that I sort of associate most with them. I am, I think, one of the rare cases where, I guess not rare cases, but I became a fan of Ring of Honor during the HDNet show, or at least that's when I discovered Ring of Honor, was through the HDNet show. Because I feel like people either became fans of Ring of Honor during the golden years or during the era under Sinclair. But I fall in that category, so it was like that 2-year period where Ring of Honor was on the HDNet channel. And I don't remember, I'm pretty sure I saw the Briscoes on there at some point. But the first pay-per-view I remember watching from Ring of Honor was Final Battle 2010, where they teamed with their father, Papa Briscoe, against the Kings of Wrestling and Shane Hagadorn. And then, after that, as I, did further diving and became more immersed with Ring of Honor, I became fans of the Briscoes, watching their, buying the DVDs and watching their matches, and then, watching their stuff on the current product and seeing what they were doing. And it's pretty easy to see how special they were as a tag team. And then later on in the Sinclair era, when they really started to really, I guess, develop the characters and the promos that we all know them for. Not that they didn't cut promos, during the golden era of Ring of Honor, but it was really during that Sinclair era where, when you go back and watch those Briscoes promos, a lot of them are from that era, and that's when they, really, I guess, developed more of their characters, where you got to see more of them on the farm, and Mark and Jay just being themselves and cutting all these wild promos. And yeah, again, this was the song that I associated with them the most. When I went to, I've seen them at a bunch of Ring of Honor shows, and not all of them were using the themes. I know one of the last times I saw them was Final Battle 2018, which is the last show that the Elite was on in SCU before AEW formed, and that was sort of in that period where they were using a bit of a darker theme when they were heels. They may have used it at Madison Square Garden, I don't remember, but there were shows that I did go to that, the Briscoes used their, Reach for the Sky theme, and like I said, it's sort of become, at least for me, it's that part of their career, that was the theme song that I most associated them with, and, they continued to use it in the Tony Khan era of Ring of Honor that's ongoing with the 3 pay-per-views last year, and then to this day, Mark is still using the theme song, so yeah, it's just, last year was a great year for the Briscoes with the FTR matches, and then, we had the obvious tragedy that happened in January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, I am not shocked by this pick at all. No, sir, because to me, you are the ROH guy at Voices of Wrestling. That and NASCAR. So, but no. Even though we have a whole bunch of people at VOW who watch ROH, who've been to ROH shows, who went to the classic shows back in the day, like Rich and John and both Joes and so forth. But to me, you are the guy I think of when I think of ROH at the site, especially Sinclair era ROH, like you said, because a lot of people do wax nostalgic about the Gabe era, the golden era, or whatever, and rightfully so. But when it comes to 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015 ROH, pre-Elite really taking things over there, you watch those shows and you have a good memory of them too. So yeah, and no surprise either that this song came around during the Sinclair era. So it all fits together there. Yeah, but yeah, again, if I had to take a guess as to which songs you would pick for this before I saw your choices, this would have been number one, no doubt about it.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, started watching the Ring of Honor 2009, 2010, and it's kind of interesting. The first real feud that I remember watching in real time with the Briscoes was the feud they have, the All Night Express, that featured a bunch of bloody battles in 2011 that were just really something else. And then it's sort of funny that they had that feud with a up and coming tag team, and they sort of the last sort of thing they did was another great feud with another with an even better tag team in FTR. But I Mark is still using the song now. Obviously, it's associated with Briscoes very much, and it's just weird thinking about the song now, and just because I could vividly remember that the day that everything happened with Jay, and it was one of those weird things where I remember what I was doing that day. I was working on stuff in the house here, and I remember reading the news when it came out, and it was one of those things where I registered it, I put on a long Twitter thread about it, about Jay and what I thought of him and his career and everything, and I remember seeing everyone just talking about it, but it never really sunk in. I saw it, I understood what happened, but it was just something that was crazy. It just didn't really sink in for a couple days, and I think it was whether I was just jogging in the neighborhood here, or whether I was watching the memorial service, where it really hit me as oh my God, he's gone way too early, and that's so sad. And I guess it sucks to one way that it sucks is that I did not see Jay wrestle live post-pandemic. The last time I saw him wrestle live was at the MSG show in 2019, which just I was thinking about this too, that there's two people on that show who since when I was there, since then, two people have passed on, and Jay Briscoe and Hana Kimura, both different reasons obviously, but far too young for them to die at. And yeah, I guess if I had one regret is I didn't get the chance to see the Briscoes again after the pandemic, but I don't think they did any. They were still, Ring of Honor was still very deep in doing their pandemic tapings, and by the time they went out of business under Sinclair and then Tony Khan bought the company, they didn't run any shows near me. So at least I can take solace in the fact that the last time I did see the Briscoes in person, as as an act wrestling, it was in the world's, as it's called, the world's most famous arena. So again, it's just very sad, but so many great memories with Jay and Mark for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I said my piece about Jay when he died on the episode with Rich a few months ago, and I won't go through the whole thing again. But since then, Mark is still wrestling, and not just wrestling, but he's happy, he's exuberant, he's so full of life. You would think after such a horrifying loss like that, you would be sullen and depressed and down, but no, he's in good spirits. He comes out for his matches and he's going crazy, and he's doing the Mark Briscoe stuff. He's the same Mark Briscoe as before. It's wild, and it's incredible to see him again still wrestling, and to see him on AEW TV, which also feels very bittersweet, I think, because it had to be because of this that he finally made it onto TV in the first place. But yeah, it's great to see him still be in the game like this, and still have the song. He mentions all the time how Jay isn't really gone. His soul is still here. Well, his voice is still here too. Reach for the sky, boy. That's Jay's voice. And as long as, Mark is still wrestling and as long as he has this song, Jay will still be around too. So that's pretty nice to think about, Sean.
Yeah. And again, just it's just nice to see Mark still going and still going strong, and hopefully he has many more years in the wrestling business to come.
Amen. All right. Well, that was number 1. Sean, what is music memory number 2?
So, music memory number 2. So, for the last 2 songs, I decided to go a little different and sort of stray away from theme songs that are specific to, actual wrestlers, and just pick sort of things that were associated with my fandom of wrestling. Now, this song, it was a theme song for a pay-per-view for SummerSlam 2005, which I did not go to that show, and it's not, I'm not picking it because I loved that show in particular, but it does associate with a point, or a larger point I want to make about my sort of musical tastes. And that song is Remedy by Seether. So, growing up in I was born in 1994, but growing up really in the early to mid 2000s, I think there were, in hindsight, there were a lot of different things sort of connected to wrestling that sort of molded my musical tastes in a lot of ways, and I think it was mainly, or two of the different things, I guess I should say, were the pay-per-view themes of the time from WWE, as well as the video games. Again, the song is Remedy by Seether, and bands like Seether or Saliva or Puddle of Mud, and probably others that I'm forgetting, were all bands that were featured as WWE pay-per-view theme songs, and that was sort of my first introduction to some of these bands. And then on the video game front, you had I know people talk about Here Comes the Pain, and that was sort of how great that game was. But for me, I think my first wrestling game that wasn't I guess technically my first wrestling game was WrestleMania 19 on the GameCube, but I don't think that had an actual musical soundtrack of actual songs. But the first one that did have a musical soundtrack of actual songs was the first SmackDown vs. Raw game. And then with that game and the later SmackDown vs. Raw games that followed in the ensuing years, there were a lot of fans that were featured on those video games that I became fans of. SmackDown vs. Raw in 2004 had bands like Breaking Benjamin on their soundtrack, and they're for those people who don't know, Breaking Benjamin, when it had its original members, currently I think only the lead singer is left in terms of original band members, but that band was born right here in the Wilkes-Barre area, so they were a local band, and having their music on a video game was really cool, and I got more into them because of that. And then in the ensuing years, you had 3 Days Grace was featured in the soundtracks, and think of other bands like, again, Puddle of Mud, and then bands like Godsmack and Rise Against, and then there were other bands where to this day there are bands that are featured on the WWE video games, or bands that did songs for pay-per-views where I don't even have much music from them aside from, from the songs that were featured in the games or the pay-per-view themes. Because I'm someone who's more like, in terms of musical tastes, if I just hear a song that I like, I will, add it to my list of songs that I listen to on a regular basis. But yeah, I guess just going back to the larger point, the pay-per-view themes of that era, the early to mid 2000s, and some of the the songs that were used in the video games as well of that period really helped shape my musical tastes, as well as other like non-wrestling related video games like NASCAR Thunder 2004 is a game that considered one of the greatest NASCAR console games of all time, and has a killer soundtrack that features songs from bands that I listen to this day, or stuff like the NFL games from that time feature Avenged Sevenfold music, and that's sort of how I found Avenged Sevenfold. And yeah, so again, sort of that growing up in that period really helped shape my musical tastes. And again, it was the pay-per-views and the video games that really molded me in that way in terms of my musical tastes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and I are simpatico when it comes to that era of wrestling music, just latching onto you, because I mentioned before on the show that the two big factors that nudged me into being a music fan in my life are Guitar Hero / Rock Band and wrestling. And given that I also grew up watching wrestling during those early to mid 2000s, surprise, surprise, a lot of that stuff is hard rock and metal. It's bands like Seether and Avenged Sevenfold and Disturbed and Breaking Benjamin and so forth. Mm-hmm. And
still some of my favorite bands to this very day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about the rest of your musical tastes, but as I got older, my tastes grew and changed, and I got more into prog rock and more dancey stuff and new wave and alternative and pop and so forth. So I look at my iTunes now, and there's Yes and Lady Gaga and The Killers and Gorillaz and Phil Collins and Daft Punk and so on. But I also look at my iTunes, and Remedy is still there, Beast and the Harlot is still there, Stricken is still there, Firefly is still there, among a bunch of other songs. And I can't say that those bands are my all-time favorite bands, but those songs are really good, and I still have an appreciation for and a love for those songs, because when you're young and getting into music, those first songs you latch onto, they latch on deep, no matter what. So, I definitely know what you mean when you say that era of music and wrestling really, molded things for you.
Yeah, and some of those bands did end up becoming some of my favorite bands, like Avenged Sevenfold, Breaking Benjamin, and Disturbed. I still have a lot of their music that I listen to this day, and I lost my train of thought, but yeah, so I was just, again, these video games and the pay-per-view themes were really influential in my musical tastes. And just sort of two quick notes I want to make, sort of one that's related to Seether, and then one that sort of goes along with the pay-per-view thing. So, when I was younger, I had wrestling figures. And in the early age of YouTube, I found videos of people doing those stop motion things with wrestling figures who will have matches and stuff like that. And it inspired me to try to make my own video. And I guess I didn't realize that like a lot of these people just like do this in their house, and they just like use their, camera phones were still very young at that time, so maybe they used the first iPhone, but it was a lot of them just, taking pictures in their house. And I brought it up to my dad. He's like, "Oh, we got to do this, professionally, and because he's a photographer, we got to do it in the studio." I was like, I don't think that we don't need to go that far, but we did. And if you go on YouTube and you search Glock Johnny, which is that was my dad's YouTube account that I used frequently. And you scroll, and you find the account, and you scroll all the way down to the first two videos. There are two stop motion wrestling figure videos that I and my dad made. And the first one, which features a John Cena figure, and funny enough, a Ron Killings action figure in APA Farouk figure, because I didn't have a referee figure. So Ron Killings was the closest thing in his APA shirt and the jeans. But yeah, the first video with John Cena, the song I
Ron
used
Simmons,
in that video,
you mean?
Ron Simmons. Did I say somebody else?
You said Ron Killings.
Ron
that's
Killings.
our truth.
I'm sorry. I got them mixed up. That is my apology. I must have said Ron Killings, but I meant Ron Simmons. Yeah, APA Farouk, Ron Simmons, whatever you want to call him. But yeah, like I said, I didn't have a referee figure, so him and his APA shirt and jeans was the closest thing I could use to referee. And in that video, we used Remedy by Seether as music. So that's a fun little a trivia note there that I did try it, and I only did 2 ones, and but they're still out there on YouTube if you want to find them. But the other note I wanted to make real quick is that, so this is a sort of a funny story. So on YouTube, I would look for pay-per-view themes, and one year, I think this was late 08, early 09, I was looking for the theme for the 2009 Royal Rumble before the Rumble happened, and I found a video that had the poster on it, or it was the video that had the poster as the video, but then it played the song. And the song they had listed for the Royal Rumble theme was Decode by Paramore. And, little did I find out later that wasn't actually the theme song for the 2009 Royal Rumble. It was I think it was Kevin Rudolph's song. But the reason why I bring that up is that, and again, this goes into the fact that, wrestling pay-per-view themes or wrestling video games helping me discover artists. That's how I discovered Paramore, believe it or not. I obviously that people know that song from Twilight, and Twilight, not for me. I get why people liked it at the time, but that certainly, in 2008, 2009, that was not my jam. But yeah, another great example right there. Like, I probably would have found them anyway at some point, but that's how I discovered them. And now, I'm going to see them in Madison Square Garden next month, which should be a lot of fun. So, yeah, again, another great example of how the video games and the pay-per-view themes really, shaped my musical tastes.
These days, I do all my shopping online. Clothes, books, outfits for my dog. I love it. Then I thought, why not get my groceries delivered too? So I downloaded the Instacart app, and sure enough, it has all my favorite stores. Macy's, Lynn's, Fresh Market, Dan's, Dick's. Everything I need delivered right to my door. Oh, the dog treats are here. Download the Instacart app or visit instacart.com to get free delivery on your first order. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply.
What strange winds of fate. Someone, puts the wrong poster on the wrong song on YouTube, and it just ends up being, the start of your fandom for an entire band. So funny how life works that way. Yeah. But going back to what you said earlier about how, there are songs that you found from a pay-per-view or a game, and how those are kind of the only songs you would have by those bands. Again, that's the same with me. I mentioned a few episodes ago with Alan Cunahan how there are just a bunch of bands in my iTunes with like just 1 or 2 songs by them that I only know of because of wrestling, and I can't tell you any other songs by them. That's all I know of them. But I can see the songs in my iTunes, and I can recall them, instantly from memory, because I've heard them over and over again, especially the ones from the video games, because I would play Day of Reckoning or SmackDown vs. Raw for hours and hours and hours, and the soundtrack would loop around, so I would hear these songs, ad nauseum. So they're all just, deep in my brain there. So I see the name Blackstone Cherry, and I think, big train rolling down the line makes me lonely. And, I see the Fireball Ministry, and I think, I led the life unchosen, gave the lesson to the broken. And, just many more bands like that. And I can't tell you any other songs by them, but those songs I know. Those songs are drilled into me. So, yeah, I can't say I'm a fan of those bands, again, but those songs are still with me. and I can't find it in my heart to delete them from my iTunes because they were part of my childhood and part of my fandom, and I still like them. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and again, it's just whether it's playing the video games for hours or remembering the video package for the Hulk Hogan's Shawn Michaels match whenever you hear Remedy by Caesar. So yeah, they certainly stick with you, especially when when you hear them a lot. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, time now for the third and final music in memory. Sean, what you got?
So, for the third and final song I picked here, we just talked about video games a lot, in wrestling video games. And this song sort of has somewhat of a connection to that, or actually a pretty big connection to that, but not in the way that a lot of you might think. So, the final song is So Fresh, So Clean by Outkast. So, in my time as a youth playing the video games and all that, during this period I was not a subscriber of the Wrestling Observer newsletter or PW Torch. So I had to get my news. When I went on the computer and had to get my wrestling news, I went to the usual. The sites that just take bits of news from the Observer and the Torch and just put it on there for free for everyone. And one of the sites was a site that's still around today called NoDQ.com. And I remember going through their different sections on their website, and they had a sort of a miscellaneous section, and they had a video series or a series of videos that they shared on their site from YouTube that they did that were called NoDQ CAW. And I was like, this is interesting. And then I looked, and then what I saw was that this was the first part of their series was, on the aforementioned WrestleMania 19 video game on the GameCube, where it was like Superman and Batman wrestling each other, or Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees wrestling each other. And little did I know at the time that what I was watching was known as a CAW league, where, or a CW league, where, for those of you who might not know what that means, it's basically people who create fictional characters on video games, and then I guess through the use of capture card technology, because, again, just to get some context, this was WrestleMania 19, came out in 2000, 2003, 2004, that sort of range, and that's when those videos started appearing on YouTube. And this is something that's been going on for years, where people will take capture cards and then just create all these different pop culture characters from movies or video games or whatever have you, and they create their own wrestling promotions with their own storylines and all this sort of crazy stuff. And this song, So Fresh So Clean by Outkast, was used in NoDQ CAW as the theme song for probably one of my personal favorite characters that I played after watching this and then making the character myself. This was the theme for Mr. Clean. And I don't know what it was. I guess it's just because I was that age and I was into the WWE video games, WrestleMania 19 and then the SmackDown vs. Raw series, where, the idea of creating, fictional characters and then putting them in the WWE game was a ton of fun. And the fact that these people sort of made their own, wrestling promotions on the video games and then just did their own storylines, their own matches, and, everything else, it was just, I thought it was super cool. And for, a long time, I, watched that stuff on YouTube, where there was, NoDQ CAW, which was around from say like 2004 to about 2007, 2008, and that was primarily on the GameCube games. First WrestleMania 19, and then onto the Day of Reckoning games. And then later on, I would discover a CAW promotion called Superstars of CAW, which was mainly for a lot of years on SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, which is still to this day one of my favorite WWE games from like the PlayStation 2, with the original General Manager mode and stuff like that. And that promotion featured a whole different cast of characters, some similar, some different, that I never would have known about beforehand if I didn't watch these videos. Like, for example, like I had no idea who anime characters like Ichigo Kurosaki, I think is his name, from Bleach, or Inuyasha, who I think is another famous anime character. I had no idea who they were. And then I watched, for example, Superstars of CAW, and they had those characters featured in their promotion, and I was like, oh, okay, now I know who these people are. And so yeah, that's pretty interesting. And like I said, it sort of led to me trying to create a lot of these characters on, myself on, SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 or 2009. And I kept that up for a while. Eventually I fell off. I think partly one of the main reasons is that it's a very involved process. Not necessarily making the characters. That wasn't terrible. I mean, the only time it was terrible was when you had to create like the Superman logo or the Batman logo, and you had to, and these games weren't exactly, they weren't exactly the most detailed, so you had to sort of use different shapes and whatever to sort of make it work on there. But what really killed it for me was like the move sets. Like the move set would always take like at least an hour to get done, and that always annoyed me. Was just going through and just making sure everything that I wanted on there was right. But yeah, I spent a lot of time watching, colleagues, and there's way more that I didn't mention that exist out there or have existed. But yeah, so like with NoDQ CAW, the people who I associate with that, Batman and Superman, and like Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers, and Spider-Man and Link from Legend of Zelda, and I guess the other guy who was the eighth pillar, if you want to call it, one of the main characters, the main cast, was Mr. Clean. So and an easy character to make too, just get a muscly bald guy, white t-shirt, white pants, white shoes, and you're all set.
When you gave me the list of songs earlier, and you gave me the reason for this song, it blew my mind, because it triggered this long buried memory of watching these videos. I watch these videos too. I used to watch them so long ago, and yeah, it was like WrestleMania 19 for the GameCube, and then later on Day of Reckoning, and there was Mr. Clean, there was Superman and Spider-Man and Ganondorf and Mario and Luigi and Ryu and all these pop culture characters and so on in a wrestling league. And the guy would do commentary over the matches. And I still remember the intro too for the videos, which was like a montage of guys like AJ Styles and Kid Cash doing like, NoDQ.com, NoDQ.com, NoDQ.com. So that's also, in my memories there. And looking back on the whole thing, it's like, wow, this is super nerdy. But I watch them because I'm a wrestling fan and a wrestling nerd, and back then I needed wrestling content. This is before the network, this is before streaming sites and all that, and I was kind of getting into, sailing the seas and downloading matches here and there, but I needed more. I needed more input. And really, in a fandom with Be the Booker forums and eFeds and stop motion wrestling figure, videos, is really any nerdier than that? I mean, we're all nerds at the end of the day. So yeah, I saw this pick and I was just over the moon about it, Sean.
Yes, and I have so many fond memories from, specifically NoDQ CAW, because that was the original colleague, and so many fun memories from their videos where there was, for example, later on when they did their big feud where Luigi turned heel on Mario, and they had their little feud, and it's funny with that one because and a lot of the characters that I took from these different leagues and made on my own video games for my own copies of SmackDown vs. Raw or whatever. A lot of them turned out pretty well. And I always thought it was funny because for whatever reason, like heel Luigi, when I watched those videos of, that feud that they did in the heel Luigi, for whatever reason, I always picked, and this is something I picked up later when I was a Ring of Honor fan, to go back to the beginning of this episode, I always associated him with Austin Aries for whatever reason. So, I know they used a different song for him in NoDQ CAW when, he was a heel, but, I don't know, like whenever I would create him on the video games, I sort of made him in the mold of Austin Aries and sort of his style and gear and whatnot. And, so that's one good memory. And then, another one specific to Mr. Clean is that, they did a show where it was like a bunch of their characters versus WWE characters on WrestleMania 19. And they had Mr. Clean facing Ric Flair. And one of the stories that they had built in NoDQ CAW is that, Mr. Clean often worked as a heel because the whole thing they said was that, he's Mr. Clean, but he fights dirty, So, and they had a segment where promoting his match with Ric Flair, where they had like a hand show. I think there was a book, an autobiography that Ric Flair wrote around 2004, 2005, and they did a video where they burned the book. They burned Ric Flair's book to build the match, and that was pretty funny. That's always something that I always remember, and yeah, it just, again, there are other CW leagues that were on, like the SmackDown vs. Raw games that are were games that I more played later on, but I'll always have a fondness for WrestleMania 19, the video game, and mainly because of NoDQ CAW, and obviously they did stuff on Day of Reckoning later on, but WrestleMania 19 was such a fascinating video game with particularly with all like the backstage stuff, because I think the main storyline of the game is that like you got fired. You pick a wrestler, you get fired by Vince, and Stephanie McMahon comes to you and like tries to get you back in by having you go around and disrupt WrestleMania through like attacking construction workers and police officers and all these random locations. And I always remember there's this one location in a harbor that they do where I guess the objective of the match is that you have to send people through these different grates that break, and when they break and you send them through, they fall into the abyss. And, yeah. and that's one of the matches that they used in the NoDQ CAW. I think they called it the Trip to Oblivion match, which is quite a name of a wrestling match. But yeah, like I said, a lot of the characters that I created on the game, whether it was in the early sort of SmackDown vs. Raw games or later games where the online community where you can go on to the online servers and like download the characters, which saves you a lot of work. Let me tell you, it saves you a ton of work. And a lot of that came from watching some of these colleagues. And as far as the WWE video games go, it's certainly something I remember fondly. And they used all sorts of different songs for the themes, and some of them were just the basic like for Superman, like the basic the John Williams Superman theme, pretty basic one, or like something like the Batman theme, either from the Dark Knight or the Tim Burton Batmans. But some of them used actual music, and this song is one that I will always associate with Mr. Clean, probably for as long as I live. So, and that's because of NoDQ CAW. So, and if anyone's curious and you want to go like check this stuff out, it's nearly 20 years old at this stage, or approaching 20 years old. There is a YouTube channel out there that's called NoDQ CAW Vault. I think it has pretty much everything they did on there. So if you ever want to go out and watch it, and if you're curious, feel free to. It's out there for free to watch it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're all still up there on that channel you mentioned. Very grainy videos too, because they're so long ago or whatever. But but they're all up there. Yeah, real throwback. It actually reminded me of another YouTube series of videos I would watch back in the day. Did you ever watch the Endorphin pro wrestling videos by any chance?
I'm actually very familiar with those. Basically, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically, I don't know how, what program or video game this is, or even if it's a video game. I'm guessing it's just like a computer simulation thing, where it's basically just essentially 3D stick figures is the best way I can describe it. Doing wrestling stuff.
Yeah, it's this program called Endorphin, which I think is discontinued now, but you could animate models and have them move around and interact with each other. And the models, they weren't like stick figures. They were more like just these really super basic, gray and blue models, almost like mannequins in a way, where they have faces, but the faces don't have any real details in them.
Yeah.
And there were these videos where, guys would animate the models to do wrestling moves. So they would do, these crazy moonsaults and destroyers and power bombs and all that stuff. And they weren't full matches. They were more highlight videos. So it was all just, very silly and basic. But again, when you're a young, bored wrestling fan looking for any sort of content, it hit the spot, Sean. I can't lie,
Yeah, I definitely remember those. And again, a lot of those were, again, not really matches, but more just highlights of people doing these mannequins doing moves, and a lot of those were set to basic music of just typically rock and stuff like that. And yeah, I definitely remember those. Those were a lot of fun, and like you said, that game or that program or whatever, it hasn't been used for a long time, or it's discontinued. Because if you look at these videos on YouTube, there's no new ones. If you look, they're all from probably at the earliest 8 years ago, and most of them are a lot older than that. But yeah, with that and with the colleagues, and all that other sort of stuff, a lot of that was coming up on YouTube. Really, I guess in YouTube's initial era, its initial infancy, that those early years of YouTube, and as a middle schooler and later in high school, that's stuff that I remember fondly, just searching YouTube and finding stuff like that and just watching it for sometimes hours and hours just because I thought it was a lot of fun. And, as someone at that age, not capable of getting torrents of Japanese wrestling shows, I had not gotten into Japanese wrestling at that point yet, or anything else like that. My wrestling watching was simply just, until I discovered Ring of Honor on the HDNet channel. It was just from 2004 to 2009. It was just WWE, and then to 2006 TNA when I discovered TNA. And as a kid I enjoyed those, but I wanted more, and that was my outlet to find it. So
you take what you can get. You just gotta take what you can get. Exactly. That's for sure. Yeah.
But very fond memories. Definitely some fond memories. And yeah, and occasionally I'll always go back and watch them and just reminisce of how wacky and crazy colleagues can be. Some of them are very basic like that, where they just have the boilerplate characters that you'll find from major pop culture, and then you'll get really weird ones. I remember one colleague, I forget what the name of it is, but I think it might still be around, but they had a wrestler or one of their characters that they created was Kramer from Seinfeld, but it had a twist where it wasn't Kramer, it was KKK Kramer. And they had him wrestle in in all white, and it was that one is definitely one of the more raunchy I think colleagues I've come across, but
I'd say, yeah.
But basically, playing off that whole incident from many years ago where he had a racist rant at a comedy club in Los Angeles, I think it was. And yeah, again, I enjoy the more basic stuff, but stuff like that could be, it's very dark comedy. It can be pretty jarring if you're not ready for it. But yeah, the world of CAW wrestling can be very wacky and very strange sometimes, but also very enjoyable and entertaining.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Music of the Mat. Thank you so much for listening. And Sean, thank you again for being here. As always, this was a lot of fun. And, whether it's talking about the Briscoes or Mr. Clean or whatever, it's always a blast, my friend.
Of course, yeah. I always enjoy appearing on Music of the Mat. And it's an amazing show, or I guess amazing podcast, I should say, that, always a good listen. So.
Well, thank you. Any plugs you want to give? Go right ahead.
All right. Well, of course, as we mentioned off the top, we are coming off of WrestleMania weekend, and I participated in 3 different reviews for Voices of Wrestling. I was part of the group review for, as you would expect, Supercard of Honor, and then I participated in the reviews of both nights of WrestleMania. So that was a lot of fun. VoicesOfWrestling.com for anything Ring of Honor related. I'll usually be involved. And I guess the other thing I'll plug is that I mention this occasionally on my Twitter and sometimes in the Discord, the Voices of Wrestling Discord. I do have a Extreme Warfare Revenge Diary, where I started as WCW in 1998. The diary is on the Be the Booker forums. Currently 2001, sort of October-ish. And in the actual game, though, itself, because I tried to, obviously do the game well in advance before I post stuff. I'm in 2002, so that's a lot of fun. And if you want to follow that series, you can definitely go to the Be the Booker forums and do that. And then just my Twitter, SA Sedor 2994, and I'm also on, of course, the VOW Discord. Just mentioned that. And if you want to talk to me there or on Twitter about anything from wrestling stuff to a lot of motorsports stuff that I talk about, I know we have a racing specific channel in the Discord. It's a lot of fun, and I tweet a lot about the races when I'm watching them. But if you want to interact with me, hey, I'm more than open to it. Wrestling, I love wrestling, but my first love will always be racing. So I'm always up to chat about it if you want to chat about it. So there you go.
If I'm not mistaken, don't you have a new wrestling draft podcast as well?
Yes, of course. Thank you for bringing it up, Andrew. I almost forgot about that. I'm sure Griffin will be very, very displeased with me that I forgot to plug that as well. But yes, we do have a podcast that just got off the ground. It's called VOW's The Draft, sort of a play on WWE's The Bump, if you're familiar with that show. We did our pilot episode recently on WrestleMania weekend and basically drafting wrestlers who were booked for the non-WWE shows on WrestleMania weekend. And our goal is to sort of do a 5-star match game-esque schedule, very infrequent, maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months, depending on if we have any fresh ideas. And that's mainly just to keep the ideas fresh and not burn ourselves out too quickly. I think at least once a month is a good starting point. Again, prevent us from running out of topics very quickly. We're probably going to release an episode sometime in April, probably towards the end of April. We haven't set a date of anything, like when we record it. Though we do have a topic in mind. I'll just leave that as a teaser. We do have a topic in mind. And, hopefully it becomes a successful series, a successful podcast series. And, I hope everyone out there gives the first episode a listen. I know we just did the voting, and, I believe, Liam from the You Got to Be Kidding Me podcast won the inaugural draft. So congratulations to Liam. He did a great job. And just look out for more episodes of that coming out, hopefully in the near future.
If you ever need someone to, take part in such a podcast, my phone lines are open. My availability is pretty good. So
of course, I'm sure we will have you on at some point. Though I will say that there is, for the topic we have in mind for the next episode, we do have a very special guest in mind, and let's just say that they're very knowledgeable. It's a topic that someone on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network is very familiar with, and I'll just leave it at that. Nothing confirmed, by the way. Not confirmed yet, but just a teaser of someone we have in mind to be on the show. I don't want to confirm something that's not confirmed yet, but yeah, definitely thinking about having this person on the show.
A very juicy hint there. Someone who knows something about something. So yes. There you go.
Very as vague as possible.
Yes. Well, Music of the Mat is, of course, part of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find all the great podcasts on there at voicesofwrestling.com. Follow the show on Twitter at Music of the Mat. Follow me on Twitter at Andrew T. Rich. voicesofwrestling.com/Discord for all discussions and comments. voicesofwrestling.com/donate. For any donations, just click the big donate button beneath the name Music of the Mat. If you donate, hey, thanks so much. You're awesome. And of course, rate, review, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many other places. Sean, thank you again, and I'll see you around.
No problem, Rich. Andrew, and almost called you Rich. Andrew Rich. There you go. And it's late here, folks. It's getting pretty tired, but thank you as always, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to be on your show and talk different wrestling, music related things with you. And again, it's a wonderful podcast.
Well, thank you, Sedor. All right, for Sean Sedor, I'm Andrew Rich, and I'll see you next time on Music of the Mat. Take care, guys.
Music of the Mat is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. The songs used throughout this show are property of their respective copyright holders.
Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and 01. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.
At Kroger, we want our fresh produce to meet your expectations, which is why we're dedicated to doing up to a 27-point inspection on our fruits and veggies, checking for things like scarring. In fact, only the best produce like zesty oranges and crisp carrots reach our shelves. Because when it comes to fresh, our higher standards mean fresher produce. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Save big on your favorites with the Buy 5 or More, Save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.